Now let's do the Turk of the Year. There's a lot of people who obviously could have been on this list, but we did want to get you some of the heroes throughout the year that oftentimes are unsung. So we start with someone who at least is celebrated because he has won an election. It's the new Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau. Now, here's a guy who said that, you know what, I'm going to create a deficit for 3 years. How is that for a complete change from what we are used to hearing from politicians in North America? He said, I'm going to spend $5 billion in infrastructure. I'm going to create jobs. Yes, I understand that takes money. Yes, I understand that creates a deficit. But we're going to do it because we're going to create more jobs and we're going to invest into this country. Won resoundingly. And he said, yes, I'm going to help indigenous women in this country. Yes, I am not going to only allow Syrian refugees. I'm going to increase the number of Syrian refugees that come into this country. And he said, when asked, what are you going to do about the economy? First order of business is to help fix climate change. Now, these are things that here in America are considered radical positions. I mean, they're logical, they are popular, but if you dare say them, our press says, oh, no, that's outside the mainstream and unacceptable. Well, it turns out it was perfectly acceptable to the Canadian people, and they elected Justin Trudeau. Look, almost everybody on this list could have been the Turk of the Year. So he was one of our candidates. I'm going to tell you who's the ultimate winner at the end of this process. So now, again, as representatives of people in this category, I'm giving part of this award to liberal Hollywood. Now, we're told in America, no, liberal Hollywood has terrible values. No, they are often have great values where they say you should help your fellow man. I know Fox News doesn't like that. They call those people do-gooders and humanists. Yes, guilty as charged. We are humanists. We believe in the humans. So among those Hollywood liberals were Sacha Baron Cohen and Isla Fisher, who gave just very recently, at the end of the year here, $1 million to help Syrian refugees across the world. Now, there's a lot of people that can go in this category. Angelina Jolie has done terrific work with Syrian refugees. There are a great number of non-celebrities who've done wonderful, wonderful, unbelievable work with Syrian refugees, going down there to help them, bring them food, bring them health care, bring them dentistry, things you wouldn't imagine, actually go there on the ground and spend a tremendous amount of time there. But one more from the Hollywood community, because I just love this quote so much. Mandy Patinkin came out against Ted Cruz when Ted Cruz said we should not allow Muslim Syrian refugees, only Christian Syrian refugees into the country. And Patinkin, of course, was the star of The Princess Bride, and Ted Cruz loves to quote that. He said, you missed the whole point of the movie. The point was to open your heart, and you haven't done that at all. And Patinkin has worked with the International Rescue Committee to help those Syrian refugees. And here's what he said. He said in his experience when he went to go talk to them and help the refugees, quote, standing with them, I did not see strangers to be feared, but the faces and stories of my own family. I saw Grandpa Max, who left Poland to escape the Nazis, and Grandma Masha, who was forced from Russia during the pogroms. And now I could help this family reach the safety of Germany, a place my ancestors had fled in search of welcoming arms. So these are the real humanitarians and the real people that sometimes get pressed, but oftentimes do not. And do great, great work behind the scenes, as well as the work they do, obviously, on camera for their living. Now, you want to talk about quiet heroes. Well, let's go to the people who are fighting terrorists and then mass shooters as well, and showed unbelievable courage. Unfortunately, they don't get anywhere near the press that the terrorists do and the shooters do. So first, we start in Kenya. Al-Shabaab is a terrorist group there that is attacking and specifically targeting non-Muslims. They'll pull Christians out of a bus. They did this recently, killed 28 non-Muslims, mainly Christians. In another attack, they killed nearly 150 people. They would ask them if they were Muslim and can recite verses of the Quran, and then if they couldn't, they would kill them. They tried it again on a bus in Kenya, and that is when the Muslims on the bus, predominantly women, but not all, came out and said, if you want to kill the Christians on this bus, you'll have to kill us all. Mohammed Abdi explained, he was a passenger on the bus. He said, the militants threatened to shoot us, but we still refused and protected our brothers and sisters. Finally, they gave up and left. an unbelievable moment of courage. The Interior Secretary of Kenya said this is what Kenya is about. This is what true courage is about. And the fact that they would not, and it not only would not let the terrorists do it, but put their own lives in grave, grave danger. These are the heroes that we don't talk enough about. Now, here in America, there are others that showed similar courage. Tywanza Sanders was in the Charleston church when Dylan Roof walked in. And while everybody was scrambling and running away from the shooter, eventually 9 people killed, Wanza, as he was known, stepped up and took a bullet for his aunt. He wanted to make sure she didn't get hit. Unfortunately, she was in her 80s. She also eventually got hit and killed. But his mom in the church was saved and lives today. Obviously, a very emotional funeral for him. But we hear all the time about Dylan Roof, but we don't hear about Wanza Sanders and his great courage in that church. Now, speaking of which, finally, in the San Bernardino shooting, Shannon Johnson, another guy who was an unbelievable hero. As the 2 radical Muslims began to shoot up the place, killing 14 people and injuring 21, Shannon Johnson grabbed a coworker and made sure that the bullets didn't get to her because they had to get through him first. Shannon Johnson was such a decent guy that Farouk, the shooter, they worked together. He had told Farouk before, hey, I know sometimes people attack you for your religion. Don't get down about that. And he tried to help Farouk, and instead Farouk and his wife murdered him. And I want to give you a quote about him from the person he saved. She said, I will always remember his left arm wrapped around me, holding me as close as possible next to him behind that chair. And amidst all the chaos, I'll always remember him saying these 3 words, I got you. And he did. He passed away, and he is an American hero and should be talked about much more so than any of these shooters. Now, one more related to terrorism, and that is François Hollande. He's the president of Paris. Obviously, horrific attack there from ISIS, killing 130 people, shook the whole world. And at the end of that, yes, France took a lot of action to fight back against ISIS. They have done a lot of bombing of Raqqa. They have taken many actions to protect their people and to proactively fight back against ISIS. But in the midst of that fear and hatred, Hollande, when asked about Syrian refugees, said, you're right, we will change our policy. We won't be accepting 24,000 Syrian refugees. We'll be accepting 30,000. We're going to increase the number. He said, some have wanted to link the influx of refugees to Friday's acts of terror. The truth is that this link exists because the people of Syria and Iraq have fled because they are martyred by the same people who attack us today. And he told the people of France, life should resume fully. France should remain as it is. Our duty is to carry on our lives. And on this issue of the refugees and accepting them, he said, we are not going to change our ways. France, he said, will remain a country of freedom. Now, that's a hero. That's a person who understands the point of Western democracy and who's not going to run from their principles because a terrorist attacked. Now, those are all incredibly worthy. They easily could have been Turk of the Year. That's why we talked about him in this context. But the guy that we gave the award to this year is a person who might fundamentally change American politics and has already begun to do that by changing the conversation entirely, by saying things that the press did not allow before and it considered outside the mainstream, against conventional wisdom, radical. Well, guess what? He's saying them, and he's enormously popular. His name is Bernie Sanders. And what he has said is, I am actually going to represent the average man. And I'm going to show it to you in videos here. And we will not just kowtow to the establishment, to the powerful. We're going to fight for the powerless, which is the essence of this Turk of the Year award. And let me begin to show you his policies and the effect he might have. But as I show you that, I want you to understand, this is a guy who in a national election right now would beat Donald Trump, the leading candidate on the Republican side, by 13 points. He has a much larger lead on Donald Trump, the leading Republican candidate, than Hillary Clinton does. He's winning against Hillary Clinton in New Hampshire. He has catching up to do in the national race. I don't know that he's going to win. I do know that somebody had to change the conversation in this country. The conversation was always between the Republicans who say we're going to take the establishment, but add on to the power of the rich and the powerful, give them even more tax breaks, deregulate them further, give them everything in the world. And the Democrats who say, no, we're just going to keep it as it is and going to keep the rich and the powerful in exactly the same situation they are. Maybe we tweak them, 5% change. Bernie Sanders says, no, this is the most important country because of all the effect that it has throughout the world, and we need to change the system entirely. So here's part of his theme for the campaign.
If we are serious about reinvigorating American democracy, we need to develop a political movement which, once again, is prepared to take on and defeat a ruling class whose greed is destroying our nation.
Before Sanders, legitimate candidates on the Democratic side were not allowed to talk about the ruling class. Oh, fringe, they would scream. Well, if he's so fringe, why is he winning in New Hampshire? Why is he a solid, overwhelming number 2 to Hillary Clinton, who has such an enormous advantage in name recognition, in favorable press, in the Democratic Party machine, yet he closes in on her every single day. He would trounce Donald Trump, who's getting all this media attention. Well, if these ideas didn't work and didn't resonate, why are they, in fact, when you actually ask the American people, working so well? So now here's more what the mainstream press would call radicalism and what the rest of us consider common sense. This is on the issue of health care. The press thought it was a big deal when Obama changed the system a little bit. Bernie Sanders says, no, we need real change.
Some of you know it and some of you don't. There is one major country on earth, one, that does not guarantee health care to all people as a right, and that is the United States of America. Today, despite the gains of the Affordable Care Act, 35 million Americans lack health insurance, and even more are underinsured. In my strong view, we must join the rest of the industrialized world, guarantee health care to every man, woman, and child as a right, not a privilege.
You see, that's a sea change. Not, hey, the private companies are still in charge, but there'll be more of you that'll get health care. Not all of you, but more of you. No. It is a right. You actually have a right to live. Isn't that a revolutionary thought? Okay, how about your life? That's your life. How about your liberty? Well, you also have a right to liberty. Fundamental reform of the criminal justice system. Take it away.
We have more people in jail today than any other country on earth. We're spending $80 billion locking people up, disproportionately Latino and African American. We need very clearly major reform in a broken criminal justice system from top to bottom. And that means when police officers out in a community do illegal activity, kill people who are unarmed, who should not be killed, they must be held accountable. It means that we end minimum sentencing for those people arrested. It means that we take marijuana out of the federal law as a crime and give states the freedom to go forward with legalizing marijuana.
We've had the war on drugs for decades, yet our ruling class tells us you must bow your head and continue this policy that we know not only doesn't work, is never going to work. Well, Bernie Sanders says, well, I'm not going to bow my head. If the policy doesn't work, we're going to change it. I didn't stutter when I said change. I meant real change. Minimum sentencing. Do you know how incredible it is to get rid of that? every other standard politician in the country. Oh, I'm going to be tough on their criminals. I'm going to take people who smoke pot, and I'm going to sentence them to years and years in jail, sometimes their whole lives in jail. Well, Bernie Sanders is saying, we have criminalized so many people. We imprison more people than any other country in the world. I'm going to change it. I'm not stuttering. I'm not kidding. That change is coming. It turns out the American people were waiting for that. Now, again, the jury's still out. We haven't started the voting yet in the election. But this is the beginning of changing a conversation that sorely needed to be changed. And finally, as a matter of attitude, get a load of this guy.
CEOs of large multinationals may like Hillary. They ain't going to like me. And Wall Street is going to like me even less. And the reason for that is we've got to deal with the elephant in the room, which is the greed, recklessness, and illegal behavior on Wall Street. When you have 6 financial institutions in this country that issue 2/3 of the credit cards and 1/3 of the mortgages, when 3 out of 4 of them are larger today than when we bailed them out because they are too big to fail, we have got to reestablish Glass-Steagall. We have got to break the large financial institutions up.
Oh, if you don't know the American political system, you can't understand how dramatic a change this would be. Other people are like, oh, well, I guess we should hold the banks a little bit more accountable, as Hillary Clinton and some of the others continue to take millions of dollars from the banks into their campaigns and also into their personal pockets through speeches. Bernie Sanders says, no, we're not going to tweak the banks. We're not going to regulate the banks a little bit more. These top 6 banks have a monopoly. We're going to break them up. No wonder the establishment is running scared. No wonder they feel the burn. So when this guy says corporate America, which almost every politician in my lifetime has bowed their heads to, of course I'm going to work with corporate America. Business is so important. They're the job creators. I bow my head. When he says corporate America and Wall Street, they ain't going to like me. Then I think a lot of people go, whoa! We didn't see that coming. I didn't know you were allowed to say that. Yeah, I feel the burn. So whether Bernie Sanders wins or not, the fact that he has actually proven that a significant percentage of Americans, and if we were in a general election today and he was the candidate, he would win against every Republican, according to the polling. Well, the fact that all those Americans agree with those policy positions, that is a sea change. So hence, Bernie Sanders, our Turk of the Year.